Dog won't stop growling at an old well. What his owner finds below is terrifying. Elias Whitmore had spent the past 10 years in near silence. His small cottage, nestled on the edge of Ashwood Forest, was filled with nothing but the steady ticking of clocks and the occasional crackle of the fireplace. He had once been a respected clockmaker in town, known for his delicate craftsmanship and the way he could bring life back into even the most broken of timepieces. But time had been cruel to him. His wife had passed away a decade ago, and soon after, his only son had left town, never to return. Elias had made peace with his solitude. He didn't mind the whispers in town that called him a recluse or a ghost of the past. The only living soul who stayed by his side was Huxley, his loyal German shepherd. The dog had been his silent companion for years, never needing words to understand him. But lately, something has changed. For the past 3 nights, Huxley had been restless. He would whimper at the door, his ears twitching as if he heard something Elias couldn't. Then each morning, he would run straight toward the woods, stopping at the same spot near an old dried-up well. At first, Elias thought it was nothing. Maybe the scent of a rabbit or some small animal had caught Huxley's attention. But on the 4th morning, when Huxley didn't just stand by the well but began growling, low and deep, his fur standing on edge, Elias knew something was wrong. The well had been there long before Elias moved to Ashwood. He had passed by it a few times while collecting firewood, but he never thought much of it. It was nothing but an old crumbling hole in the ground, surrounded by moss-covered stones and thick vines. The town's children had once been warned to stay away from it, their parents telling them stories of how it swallowed people whole. Elias had never believed in ghost stories, but as he approached the well that morning, a strange unease settled in his chest. Huxley stood at the edge, his body tense, his growl now turning into an urgent whine. He glanced back at Elias, then back at the well, as if trying to tell him something. "What is it, boy?" Elias muttered, stepping closer. Then he heard it. A faint sound, so soft it could have been the wind. But it wasn't the wind. It was a whimper. Elias froze. His breath hitched. He peered into the darkness of the well, his heart pounding. At first, he saw nothing, just a pit of shadows too deep for the morning light to reach. Then, as his eyes adjusted, he saw movement. A small, frail hand gripping onto the rusted chain that dangled inside. Elias stumbled back, his pulse hammering in his ears. There was someone down there, someone barely holding on. For a moment, Elias could only stare. His mind raced with questions. How long had this person been there? Who were they? How had they even fallen in? But there was no time to think. "Huxley, go home," he ordered, his voice sharp. The dog hesitated, then bolted toward the cottage, knowing well enough to listen when Elias used that tone. Elias scanned the area, searching for something, anything to help. There was no rope, but the rusted chain inside the well seemed strong enough. Taking a deep breath, he grabbed hold of the chain and tested its weight. It groaned under his grip but held firm. He leaned over the edge, calling down, "Hold on! I'm coming!" A small gasp was the only response. Lowering himself carefully, Elias climbed down the chain, his muscles straining with the effort. The damp air inside the well was thick, making it hard to breathe. He could hear the person below breathing fast, shallow. As he got closer, the dim light revealed more. A child no older than 10, clinging to the chain with trembling fingers. His face was smeared with dirt, his clothes torn, his bare feet scraped and bloody. But what struck Elias the most was his eyes, wide, terrified, and utterly silent. "I've got you," Elias said gently, wrapping an arm around the boy. The child flinched but didn't resist. Climbing back up with one arm while holding the boy against his chest was agonizing. The chain dug into his hands, his muscles burned, but he refused to stop. When they finally reached the surface, Elias collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. The boy lay beside him, motionless, staring up at the sky as if he had forgotten what it looked like. Huxley returned moments later, panting and frantic. He licked the boy's face, nudging him with his nose as if urging him to respond. Still, the boy said nothing. Not a single word. Back at the cottage, Elias cleaned the boy's wounds, wrapped him in warm blankets, and offered him food. The child accepted it but ate slowly, cautiously, as if he hadn't had a proper meal in days. Elias tried asking questions. "What's your name? Where are your parents?" How did you end up in that well?" The boy just stared. His silence was unnatural. Not like he was refusing to speak, but as if he couldn't. Elias didn't press him. Instead, he let him rest. The boy's eyelids grew heavy and soon he was fast asleep, curled up on Elias's couch. But even in sleep, his small body twitched with fear. Elias sat nearby, staring at the fire, his mind restless. Something was wrong. A child doesn't just end up in a well. Someone had put him there. And whoever had left him to die might come looking for him. The next morning, Elias went to town. He rarely spoke to anyone, but this time, he had no choice. Someone had to recognize the boy. Someone had to know something. At the local cafe, he showed a few townsfolk the boy's description, but no one claimed to know him. That was until he ran into Walter Grayson, the town's historian. Walter was an old man with sharp eyes and a sharper memory. When Elias described the boy, the historian's face paled. "Did you say he doesn't speak?" Walter asked, his voice suddenly hushed. Elias nodded. Not a word. Walter swallowed hard. "You need to be careful, Elias." Elias frowned. "What do you mean?" Walter hesitated, then leaned in closer. 20 years ago, he whispered, there was another case. A child found wandering near the woods. Mute. No records of where he came from. The town took him in, but one night, he disappeared. Just vanished without a trace. Elias felt his stomach drop. "Some folks say it was just bad luck," Walter continued, his voice grim. "But others, they say someone took him back." Elias stiffened. "Who?" Walter only shook his head. "No one knows, and those who do won't say." Elias returned home with a growing sense of unease. The story Walter had told him gnawed at his mind. If history was repeating itself, then the boy was in danger. That night, as Elias locked the doors and checked on the sleeping child, Huxley growled at the window. Elias turned and froze. Beyond the tree line in the darkness of the woods, a figure stood watching the house. Still, silent. Then, as if sensing Elias's eyes on them, the figure stepped backward, slowly fading into the shadows. And just like that, they were gone. Elias's blood ran cold. Someone knew the boy was here, and they wanted him back.
Elias didn't sleep that night. After seeing the shadowy figure in the woods, he sat by the window, a loaded rifle resting across his lap. Huxley remained beside him, his ears perked, his gaze fixed on the darkness outside. The boy slept soundly on the couch, unaware of the growing tension in the house. Elias watched him, his mind racing. Who was after him? And why had he been thrown into that well? As the night stretched on, Elias expected the figure to return, but no one came. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the trees, he was exhausted. But he knew this was far from over. Someone had been watching, and whoever they weren't done yet. The boy woke up just after sunrise, rubbing his eyes sleepily. He looked around, momentarily confused, before his gaze landed on Elias. For the first time, his face softened, not with fear, but with something that almost looked like trust. Elias placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. "Eat." The boy hesitated, then picked up a piece of toast and nibbled on it. Elias sat across from him. "Can you write?" The boy paused. Slowly, he nodded. Elias grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil, sliding it across the table. "Write your name." The boy stared at the paper for a long moment. Then, gripping the pencil tightly, he wrote a single word in shaky, uneven letters. "Nico." Elias exhaled slowly. "Nico," he repeated. The name felt small on his tongue, fragile. Nico nodded, his eyes searching Elias's face. Encouraged, Elias pressed further. "Do you know who put you in the well?" Nico's entire body tensed. His fingers clenched around the pencil, his breathing growing shallow. Then, slowly, he wrote again. "Bad men." A chill ran down Elias's spine. "Who are they?" he asked. Nico's grip on the pencil trembled. He swallowed hard, then scrawled another word beneath the first. "Watchers." Elias felt his stomach drop. Elias needed answers, and there was only one person in town who might have them. After making sure Nico was safe inside the house, with strict orders for Huxley to keep watch, Elias headed into town. Walter Grayson, the town's historian, It wasn't easy to rattle, but when Elias told him the boy's name, the old man visibly paled. "Nico?" Walter whispered, rubbing his temples. "God help us. You know something," Elias pressed. "Tell me." Walter hesitated, then sighed heavily. "Come inside." The historian's house was cluttered with old books, maps, and newspapers stacked in messy piles. Walter shuffled through a drawer, pulling out a faded newspaper clipping. He handed it to Elias. The headline read, "Missing child found, unable to speak." Below it was a black and white photo of a boy. His face was eerily familiar. Elias's blood ran cold. This is Nico." Walter shook his head. "No, that photo was taken 20 years ago." Elias looked closer. It wasn't Nico, but it could have been his twin or his father. Walter sat down, rubbing his face. There was a boy back then, same age, same silence. He was found wandering near the woods, just like Nico. What happened to him? Elias asked. Walter swallowed hard. "He vanished." Elias's heart pounded. "Vanished?" "The sheriff said he ran away," Walter said bitterly, "but folks around here knew better." Elias gripped the paper tighter. "What do you mean?" Walter leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They call themselves the Watchers." Walter's hands trembled as he spoke. "They've been around for as long as this town has existed," he murmured. "A secret group. No one knows exactly who they are, but they watch. They decide who belongs and who doesn't. And when they decide someone doesn't," he exhaled shakily, "they disappear." Elias felt a chill creep up his spine. "You think Nico was meant to disappear?" he asked. Walter nodded grimly. "And if they know you have him, you're in danger too." Elias clenched his fists. He had always dismissed the town's whispers about secret societies and dark dealings. But now, with Nico's name written in shaky letters and the shadowy figure watching his house, he couldn't ignore it. He needed to get Nico out of town, fast. Elias hurried back to his cottage, his pulse hammering. But as he reached the clearing, he froze. The front door was slightly ajar. His chest tightened. "Nico," he called, stepping inside. Silence. The house was empty. Panic surged through him. He rushed to the back door, wide open. His eyes darted to the woods. The same woods where he had found Nico. Then he saw them. Footprints, small ones, leading straight into the trees. Someone had taken him. Huxley came bounding toward Elias from the trees, barking furiously. The dog had tried to stop them, but failed. Elias grabbed his rifle, his heart pounding. He wasn't going to lose Nico. Not now. Not ever. Elias followed the tracks, moving quickly through the dense forest. Huxley stayed ahead, sniffing the ground, leading him deeper into the woods. Then, voices. Low, murmuring. Elias slowed his steps, his grip tightening on the rifle. Peering through the trees, he spotted them. 3 figures dressed in dark coats stood near the old well, the very place Nico had been left to die. And in the center of them, Nico. The boy was on his knees, his hands trembling, his eyes wide with terror. One of the men knelt beside him, speaking in a hushed tone. Elias couldn't hear the words, but the threat in them was clear. Rage flared inside him. He raised the rifle. "Let him go," Elias commanded, stepping into the clearing. The 3 men turned. Their faces were hidden beneath dark hoods, their eyes cold and emotionless. The tallest one took a step forward. "This doesn't concern you, Whitmore." Elias's finger hovered over the trigger. "It does now." The man chuckled. "You don't understand what you've done. That boy, he was never meant to be found." Elias's hands shook with fury. "I don't care, he's coming with me." Silence. Then, without warning, one of the men lunged. Elias fired. The shot rang out through the forest. Birds scattered. The man staggered back, clutching his arm. Elias aimed again. "Next shot goes through your skull." The leader raised a hand, signaling the others to stop. He glared at Elias. "This isn't over." Elias didn't lower the gun. "It is for tonight." The leader exhaled sharply, then nodded toward Nico. "Go." Nico scrambled to his feet and ran straight into Elias's arms. Without another word, Elias backed away, keeping the rifle aimed at the men until he and Nico disappeared into the trees. By the time they reached the cottage, Nico was shaking violently. Elias knelt before him, gripping his shoulders. "You're safe now," he said firmly. "I won't let them take you." Nico stared at him, then grabbed the pencil again. This time, he didn't write words. He drew. A symbol. The same one Walter had shown him in the old newspaper. The mark of the Watchers. Elias exhaled. He had been right. This wasn't over, and now there was no turning back. Elias didn't sleep that night. He sat by the fireplace, his rifle within reach, watching over Nico, who lay curled up on the couch, gripping the blanket tightly. Huxley rested beside him, his ears twitching at every sound outside. The boy had barely spoken, if scribbled words on paper could be called speaking, since Elias had pulled him from the watcher's grasp. But he didn't need to say anything. His trembling hands, his wide, fearful eyes, they said enough. The watchers had let them go, but Elias knew it wasn't mercy. It was a warning. They weren't done, and they would come back. Elias tightened his jaw. If they wanted Nico, they'd have to go through him first. But he needed answers, real ones, and he knew just where to get them. The next morning, Elias left Nico under Huxley's watchful eyes and headed straight for town. He didn't stop at Walter's. This time, he went to the sheriff. Sheriff Bill Hawkins had been keeping the peace in Ashwood for over 20 years. He was a tall, broad man with greying hair and a face carved with deep lines of experience. Elias had never had much to do with him, until now. Storming into the sheriff's office, Elias slammed his hands on the desk. "We need to talk." Sheriff Hawkins barely looked up from his paperwork. "Morning to you too, Elias." "Cut the small talk," Elias snapped. "I know about the watchers." That got the sheriff's attention. His eyes darkened, his fingers tightening around his pen. "Who told you that name? Does it matter?" Elias shot back. "I found a boy in the well, Nico, and your watchers tried to take him last night." The sheriff's face remained unreadable, but Elias saw the flicker of something in his eyes. Regret, fear, resignation. Finally, the sheriff leaned back in his chair and sighed. "You should have left this alone, Elias. Too late for that." The sheriff exhaled, rubbing his temples. "This town has secrets, always has, but some secrets, they're kept for a reason." Elias clenched his fists. "What the hell does that mean?" The sheriff hesitated, then stood and walked to the window, staring out at the quiet streets. "They take the ones who don't belong," he said finally, his voice low. "They always have." Elias's stomach twisted. "The missing children?" he asked. "All those cases over the years?" The sheriff nodded slowly. "Most people around here think those kids just ran away, but the truth is, some of them never had the chance." Elias swallowed hard. "Why?" The sheriff turned to face him, his expression grim. "I don't know the full story. No one does, except for the ones inside. But I do know this. Nico wasn't the first, and if you don't get him out of town, he won't be the last." Elias returned home with a knot in his chest. The sheriff's warning had been clear. Nico wasn't safe here. But where could they go? Elias wasn't a man of many friends. He had no connections outside of Ashwood, no relatives who could take them in. If he ran, the watchers would follow. He needed something else. Something they weren't expecting. That night, as Nico sat quietly at the kitchen table, Elias slid a piece of paper toward him. "Can you tell me what you remember?" Nico hesitated, then picked up the pencil. For the first time, he didn't just write a word. He drew. A house, hidden deep in the woods, surrounded by trees. A symbol on the door, the same one Walter had shown Elias in the newspaper clippings. And beside it, a man. Tall, shadowed, watching. Elias's stomach twisted. "Do you know him?" Nico's hand shook as he wrote 3 letters beneath the drawing. "Yes." Elias took a slow, steady breath. "Where is this place?" Nico pointed to the drawing. Then, with hesitant fingers, he tapped the table, right in the center. Elias frowned. "Here?" Nico nodded. Then, finally, he whispered, his first words since they met. Under, Elias's blood ran cold. The watchers weren't operating from some distant, hidden location. They were here, beneath the town. Beneath Ashwood itself. Walter had once told Elias about the old tunnels running under the town, abandoned mines from decades ago. Some had collapsed, others were sealed. But if the watchers had been around as long as Walter claimed, they could have used them. Elias gritted his teeth. If they were under Ashwood, they weren't just taking children, they were keeping them. Elias wasn't one for half measures. If the watchers wanted Nico, they'd have to face him. Grabbing his rifle and a lantern, he led Nico and Huxley to the woods, following the boys' directions to where the tunnels might be. They walked for nearly an hour before they found it. A trapdoor, hidden beneath a layer of moss and leaves. Elias knelt, brushing away the debris. The wooden planks were old, but the metal lock on the latch was new. This place was being used. Elias looked at Nico. "Stay behind me." Then, gripping his rifle, he pulled open the door. A cold, musty breeze rushed upward from the darkness below. Taking a deep breath, Elias stepped inside. The tunnels beneath Ashwood were long and winding, carved from stone and damp earth. Elias moved carefully, his lantern casting flickering shadows against the walls. The deeper they went, the stronger the stench became. Mold, damp wood, something else. Then they heard it. Footsteps. Elias froze, pulling Nico behind him. Huxley's ears twitched, his body tense. The footsteps grew louder. Then, voices. Low, murmuring. The Watchers. Elias lifted the lantern higher, and what he saw made his stomach turn. Cages. Rusty, iron cages lined along the walls. Some were empty, but others. Nico let out a tiny whimper. Inside one of the cages, curled up against the bars, was a girl no older than 6. Her face was hollow, her eyes wide with fear. Elias clenched his jaw. This was it. This was where the missing children had gone. The Watchers weren't just taking them. They were keeping them. For what, Elias didn't know, and he didn't want to find out. A voice echoed through the tunnels. You should not have come here, Elias. From the shadows, the Watchers stepped forward. 3 men, dressed in dark coats, their faces hidden. The leader, the same one from before, took a slow step forward. The boy belongs to us, he said. Give him back and we'll let you walk away. Elias leveled the rifle. Over my dead body. The leader sighed. If that's how you want it. Then, chaos. One of the Watchers lunged. Elias fired. The shot rang through the tunnels, but they kept coming. Huxley leapt forward, sinking his teeth into one of them, dragging him down. Elias grabbed Nico and ran. Bullets whizzed past. Shouts filled the tunnels. But Elias had one advantage. He wasn't alone. Nico grabbed his hand, leading him through a narrow passage. They burst into another tunnel, one that led upward. Daylight. Salvation. With a final push, Elias and Nico escaped. The police arrived hours later, after Walter had called them. The tunnels were sealed. The Watchers disappeared, but the missing children were found. And Nico? He stayed with Elias. As the weeks passed, the boy found his voice again. And one evening, as they sat by the fire, Nico turned to Elias and whispered, "Thank you." Elias smiled. For the first time in years, he felt whole, and in the distance, the forest watched in silence. The Watchers were gone. But for how long?